So how do we determine if two events are complementary events? You remember that if there are only two possible outcomes, then those two events are complementary. The question we ask ourselves to help us determine if two events are complementary is, are there any other possible outcomes? If there are other possible outcomes, then those two events are not complementary. But if there are no other possible outcomes, then those two events are complementary. Let's consider our first two events, rolling an even number on a die and rolling an odd number on a die. If we think about a standard six-sided die, there are six faces numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those numbers are either even or they're odd. There are no other possibilities for rolling a number on a die. So yes, these two events are complementary. They're complementary because there are no other possible outcomes. They're the only two outcomes, either even or odd. Our next two events are the sun shining or rainy weather. So we have to ask ourselves, are there any other possible outcomes? Well, I think there are because the sun shining and rainy weather are two possible events. But what about if it's cloudy, so it's not sunshiny, but there's no rain? Or what about if it snows? Or what about if it's nighttime, but not raining? There are other possible outcomes that we could have here, not just the sun shining or raining weather. So these are not complementary events because there are other possibilities. Our purple bubble, the two options are wearing pink socks and not wearing socks. Are there any other possible outcomes? Well, right now I'm wearing black socks, and that's not one of those two choices. So obviously there are other possible outcomes. You could wear green socks or odd socks or yellow socks or white socks. So the two options of wearing pink socks or not wearing any socks at all are not complementary because there are other possibilities. And lastly, if we look at our reddish bubble, our two events are passing a test or failing a test. Are there any other possible outcomes? Really, you either pass a test or you fail a test. You can't sort of tie a test like you could in a sports game. So the only two options are you pass the test or you fail the test, provided you did actually take the test. So they are complementary events because they're your only two options. You pass or you fail a test that you have taken. So to remind ourselves, if we're trying to figure out if two events are complementary, we always ask ourselves, are there any other possible outcomes? Complementary events are the only two possible outcomes, so if there are others, then they can't be complementary events.